Today on the podcast, I'm pleased and excited to introduce an incredible entrepreneur and a very dear friend of mine, Avi Ahdoot. He's a fellow podcaster, a fellow real estate aficionado, an alum, as am I, from USC in Southern California, and an entrepreneur as well. Avi's career took an interesting turn during COVID. Whose didn't? But in this case, when COVID hit, Avi, who is a real foodie, turned his obsession, the perfect sandwich, into a business that hit Los Angeles by storm. Carla Cafe has become a much sought after delicacy that you've got to try when you're in LA. We'll talk food, cities, obsessions, and more. Help me welcome my very, very dear friend, Avi Ahdoot. Avi, welcome to the Black Hall Podcast.
Good to be here. I'm a listener.
Well, you're an inspiration too. So many of the things that we talk about, I talk about on the podcast with other people. When you think back to your childhood, what do you think shaped you to put you in a psychological place to want to be an entrepreneur?
Childhood, I automatically would think about parenting. I can't think about anything parenting wise in particular, but I would say going through school, the mold of school just didn't fit me. And so I think the fact that I never felt comfortable under the confines of other people's rules or other people's ways of, measuring performance. I think all of that made it, I think it made it hard for me to ever imagine having a job. Right. I think that's a part of it.
How old do you think you were when you started to think, I don't know if I like these structures and I might want to make my own structures, or God, I just wish I didn't have the confines of these structures. That might be what you feel.
Maybe even middle school. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe even middle school.
You started to think, I think I'd be better off with creating my own structure.
Yeah. Well, and then my dad was essentially an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, tell everybody a little bit about your dad's background, your parents' background, which then kind of gives into some of your background. Yeah,
but my parents are from Iran, moved here in the late 70s to America, Los Angeles. And then
all part of the major exodus of
the revolution.
Of Iranian exodus during the revolution.
Yeah, where I think most of the Jews left. And really any Muslims that weren't extremists left too, or that were secular and more progressive for whatever that meant in the 70s. I think they, like my friends that are Persian Muslim, yeah, their parents were like seeing what was going on. They're like, no, we can't stick around for this.
Well, I mean, Iran in the 70s, you see all the pictures, looked like America in the 70s.
Yeah.
So it was, men, women, all having very similar rights. Mm-hmm. Society having a lot of liberalism in the sense of having a lot of freedom. And then suddenly you have a regime change that bends toward a lot of autocracy.
Yeah.
And so your dad saw that coming and said, let's get the kids out of here.
Yeah.
At the time, was it just your sister?
Only my sister was alive yet, born at that point. And then I think moved his siblings too. Figured out a way to kind of get everyone to America. Had to leave assets behind, homes behind. And then basically start a new life here. I think he was able to get a decent foundational setup to start himself. And I don't know what I think even back in Iran, I know he had stores where they would sell different forms of electronics. At some points it was like maybe radio, at some points it was refrigeration. And then so when he moved to America, I think he then kind of followed the same path. At some point they had a huge, I think multiple location store, kind of like Circuit City, but it was called Allen's Mart, named after my brother. Him and his brothers ran that together. We're doing really well. And then I forget the exact, a perfect storm of events where then that folded. And then at some point switched into video games specifically, became a video game wholesaler or distributor.
Like an early GameStop kind of, but no rental, but.
Yeah, but more was supplying. This is back when there would be, it was probably even pre-GameStop, but so there would be like retail stores that maybe didn't have a big like chain brand name attached to them. And they basically would rely on suppliers like my dad, who would maybe get direct or closer to direct from Nintendo, Sony. And then they were relying on wholesalers. And so my dad was running that business for a while.
And this was all in LA. You were born in LA.
Yeah.
Your other two brothers were born in LA.
Yeah, exactly.
And so everybody grew up, very culturally American, but yet still having a Persian community.
Yeah. Hybrid.
But then your parents, their first language is Farsi. Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
And what was that like growing up? Like when you,
I think that was another maybe part of my, struggle with school a little bit. I couldn't necessarily go home and get help with homework. I think Farsi might have even really been the first language I learned. Right. So,
of course,
yeah. So I just remember being in school and just feeling, behind compared to everyone else. I think a part of that was like, a language and cultural thing where I think, the non-Iranians or people that had American parents, they had the benefit of learning some things like directly from their family that maybe would sometimes apply to school or subjects that would come up. I think the language, I don't know to what extent the language thing was a barrier for me, but definitely it was at some point a little bit of a struggle.
We have listeners of this podcast all over the world. Say something to the listeners who might speak Farsi.
Oh man, so this is a funny thing too, is that my Farsi used to be amazing. And then at some point my parents wanted to learn English. So then we transitioned to like speaking English in the house.
But I've watched you speak to your parents in Farsi. So say hello to your parents in Farsi.
It used to be better. My accent used to be better. Salam, mama and baba. Shit, man. I like now I'm so used to speaking to my parents in like almost like Spanglish, but
Spanglish,
Persian.
right?
Yeah,
Spanglish,
so I mix in like Farsi and English, and so it's not until like someone
is pure.
If someone is speaking to me like in Farsi, then it'll like I can start pulling it out, but like for me,
yeah. So I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I always love watching you speak Farsi to your parents or to your other relatives who don't speak English as well. And it really, anytime I see people who have a true other language that is fluent or semi-fluent, I always find it to be impressive because even. I speak a little bit of Spanish to get around and my Spanish is okay.
It's pretty good.
But my Spanish, I've never felt like I was fluent. Like it feels like a code language.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't feel like an actual expression of like a human expression of my ability to articulate myself. Like I have no idea what my accent sounds like in Spanish. I have no idea how to like really have intonation differently in Spanish. I don't have any nuance in Spanish, so that's why it feels like a code language to me. And so when I see other people that actually like can live a life, right, in another language and actually have a personality in another language, I've never gotten to experience that.
But I would say Farsi feels like that for me now too. And I think it's a conversation you and I had, and you made me realize that it's unfortunately been a barrier between like me and my dad being able to have as deep of like conversations as we otherwise would.
Because he's such a soulful guy.
Because if when he wants to get into his deeper ideas, then words will come out that I've never learned, and then same thing for me. If I want to articulate something on a deeper level, it's going to come out in English at this point, and so I won't have the words in Farsi so that's been an interesting like kind of side effect of having to move here and like, like that barrier with communication with your own parents.
Yeah. Even, that one time when I was at your house and your dad had that, poetry book laying out on the table, and it was all written in Farsi. Yeah. And I was looking through it and I said, who is this poet? and he starts telling me about the poet and tells me the poet's name, but he's using the poet's first name and maybe even the poet's first name and middle name.
Yeah.
But it turns out it was Rumi.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, oh, it's Rumi. Okay. All right. But even that, in that he didn't know that I, as an English speaker, might only know him as Rumi.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas like in Farsi, they obviously refer to him as his first name, like Madonna.
And someone you would both know their work like deeply.
Yes.
But yet that like even that there's like a barrier.
Just trying to figure out who we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Is a barrier. But your dad is so soulful that he cuts through language. I think he cuts through language pretty well, you know, in that he can speak, he speaks with his eyes and his tone and his just spirit. His spirit comes through. For sure. Even in English, for sure, it comes through.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's kind of, you know, that's some of the background. Let's talk a little bit about Carla. And I want you to, you know, you've told this story so many times, but tell the short version, because people can go find out more about Carla. They can read articles or whatever. They can just research about it. But let's talk a little bit about it. But then I want to talk about more of the effects of you getting to unleash this part of your life.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think has been such a joy to watch.
Right.
And I know has brought you a lot of joy. But to give you guys context who aren't from LA, Carla Cafe is what Avi started in COVID, and it's become, you know, I mean, barely even arguably, like anybody who knows that a Carla Cafe sandwich is the best sandwich in Los Angeles. And that's all evolved in a short amount of time. I think 3 years, really.
3 years then.
Yeah. And they're getting ready to open their first storefront, which is funny to think about, like how much growth and how much success they've experienced without a storefront, which is also kind of like a modern phenomena. Mm-hmm. But with that as a little context, you know, tell us what happened there.
I think for me, it's hard to bring up the start of Carla without bringing up the last venture I was working on. Like, so I was working on a startup. It was a mobile app called Truey. I was working on that since my early to mid 20s. And at that point, I think when I started Carla, I was 29. So I was like 5 or 6 years into working on this, on my own startup that just wasn't taking off. And then so COVID hits, we go into lockdown, and I don't know if I was going to naturally come to grips or come to accept that I couldn't keep fighting to maybe make Truey happen. But when the pandemic hit and there was a pause, I had a conversation with my brother, and we talk about it, and we decide, like,
this is Alan, right?
Yeah, this is Alan. What can you start working on now to make money? What's anything you could do right now to make any amount of money?
Because he's a realist.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Right. I mean, he, as much as he wants to encourage dreaming.
Yeah.
Alan at the core is a realist. Like, for sure. He's a concrete realist.
For sure. And so I think he probably struggled with not wanting to step on my spirit, but at the same time was like, you're about to be 30, right? You have a girlfriend you've been dating for probably 8-9 years at that point, right? That's waiting for you to be able to marry her, and you're not making any money. And all this startup is doing is costing, you know, my dad. At that point, my dad was helping fund it with money that he didn't even, like, he doesn't really have like excess income right now. Yeah. So, and he's like, and then, but it was an interesting constraint of what can you do to make money now? Like, so at the time, I don't know if I told you this, but I was working because I was aware of, like, if I wanted to keep working on Truey, I still needed a source of income. Mm-hmm. And so I had started working on taking my broker's license.
No, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was doing it during COVID, and I mean, it was all straightforward. I understood it wasn't difficult for me to learn. I think I was understanding it at a high level of, like, what does being a good broker actually look like. But when it came to the actual, like, functions of what it takes to do that job well, and me thinking about doing that, it was soul crushing.
Jay Lux is so lucky that you didn't become a broker. You would have taken over everything in Beverly Hills.
I just, so But when I told my brother, oh, well, I'm working on getting my broker's license, he's like, yeah, but even then, how long is it going to take you to close your first deal? I mean, like, what are you going to do to make money right now? And so,
like next week.
Yeah. And so when he gave me that constraint,
wait, no, wasn't there another constraint? You can't drive Uber.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one, like basically anything where you can make any amount of money now besides like driving Uber. Right. So,
sometimes you need people in life to give you constraints.
I think a lot of constraints create sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It generates creativity because there's constraints.
Yeah. Yeah, and you would think that lack of constraints would allow more creativity, but sometimes constraints bring about the right kind of functional creativity or
if you go to engineering firms, one of the primary purposes of having managers of those firms is to give the engineers constraints.
Right.
Because a lot of engineers can figure out how to build a rocket to get into space or go to the moon or whatever. But if they have no budgetary constraints, right, they can do that. You have Elon Musk come in and say, well, no, we're going to do all this, but we have these kind of economic constraints, right? Because we need to be able to make a reusable rocket and this and that. And he gets the best out of them because he's squeezing all the creativity under those constraints.
Yeah.
That's why he's had more success than NASA.
Right.
Because it was harder for NASA.
Is SpaceX making money already?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like
SpaceX it has huge, massive billion-dollar contracts with the government.
Right. Like he could have went about that as like, I'm rich and my goal is just to make a rocket that goes to Mars. But instead he's like, well, how do I start building, how do we start working on rockets, but then start making money doing this so it funds itself so that eventually we iterate to the point that we get to Mars.
That's right.
Right.
So Alan puts these constraints that are, you got to start making money and you can't drive Uber.
Right. And then so when he tells me that, and I'm thinking, well, what the fuck what do I know how to do where I can start making money tomorrow?
It's a real bitch when you realize, I think about this all the time. I don't really have a trade.
Yeah.
Like I don't have anything to fall back on. Like I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
I'm not an attorney. I'm not a welder.
Not even an electrician.
I'm not an electrician. I'm not an accountant. Yeah, right. Like literally there's like nothing anybody would pay me to do.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So my entire existence has been imagining things to put a whole bunch of other people to work to do in many ways. And that's what the job of a developer is to imagine and then put teams together and then execute. But I'm not necessarily executing the particulars.
No.
I'm just in charge of giving the constraints in many ways.
Right.
And then providing accountabilities to a point.
Right. So, and then, so this is where, so when I'm thinking about what can I do to make some money now, this is now I'll have to like rewind to a couple years back. So I'm in the heat of working on Truey, the startup that I was talking about earlier. And when I was working on that startup, when you're trying to make, a consumer technology like that take off, there's a concept called product market fit, like where when you've built a product that consumers actually want, like the signals will be there, and if you actually create that product in the right way, like the growth will just like take off. I mean, any of these apps, anything that's taken off in technology in particular, but probably really anything if we're to think about it. But you cannot build like a massive company through just sheer paying for marketing. Like ultimately you need to create a product so good and so useful and it fits a need so well, and maybe even a need people didn't know they had, that the consumers will basically do the marketing for you. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you could supplement, you could do little things to spark some like, but ultimately, like if you're really going to grow, like most of that growth is going to be from other consumers, like Snapchat, Facebook, whatever. Any of these,
Instagram, too,
none of them have been through paid ads, right? You can't. It's not, no paid marketing is going to do that free. So it all actually comes down to like creating the right product.
Do people actually use it, consume it, and like it?
Right. And so I understood that, like, so when I was working on Truey and I was in the trenches for that, it was all about what iterations of this product, like how do I have to keep iterating this to the point where it has that spark where you could see that energy is there. Mm-hmm. And so you start to understand, and then you understand what that signal is supposed to look like. And when I'm in the middle of trying to create a product that's going to have that signal at home as a hobby, I was making, I would make sandwiches for Jessica and I. And when Jessica would post a picture of that sandwich on Instagram, she would get the most DMs in response to a picture of that sandwich than anything else that she'd ever posted. And I mean, like 2 months later, we would be at a wedding and someone's mom that follows her would be like, where did you get that sandwich? We're like, what are you talking about? What sandwich are you? We're like, oh, that we made that at home. So that's and then the other thing about this, like you also want to look for the right type of signal. And the thing about that signal for the sandwiches was it wasn't people just being like, oh, cute, that looks good. It was like people were like, where can I get that sandwich? Where can I get that sandwich? Where can I get? They didn't know it was homemade, and everyone just wanted to know, where can I go get it? And so when I'm working on
they hadn't even tasted it yet.
They hadn't even, just looking at it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, when I'm like, I've been like grinding 5 years on a startup looking for that type of response. Mm-hmm. And it was just there with those sandwiches. And so like, as you'd imagine, like, so that was like interesting to me, but also a little bit frustrating. I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah, like I'm trying to create this with something else. And then, but with these sandwiches just kind of there. But at the same time, I was also like, okay, but what am I going to do with that signal? Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't until years later, my brother's like, gave me that constraint of what can you do to make money now? Where then I went back to that memory filed away where I was like, well, I'm pretty sure I could sell some sandwiches.
The signals seem to be there.
The signal seemed to be there for product market fit already. But still, I didn't imagine, to me, when I was like, the signal is there that I could start selling probably 30, 35 sandwiches out of the house, maybe like once a week, and put a couple $100 in my pocket.
Right.
That was like what I thought. Right.
You're meeting the constraint.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Right. I mean, if you could figure out a way to make a few $1,000s a month.
Yeah.
Right. You could kind of,
yeah, right.
Not really pay for yourself, but
it was something.
Start down the road.
For me, it was something. For me, it was like just, and I think that's what he wanted me to feel too. Is just like, I want you to get the feeling of just some sort of income that you're creating on your own. And so, okay, so
and that's actually one of the benefits of being forced into taking care of yourself at some point.
Right,
is that constraint.
Yeah.
Right. So you were fortunate enough to have parents who had enough space in their house and enough money that they could give you maybe too much freedom.
Right.
In that regard.
Right.
And so if you would have been forced into that constraint at age 22,
right,
you might have started making sandwiches at age 24. Yeah. I mean, or some other,
something
right?
else. Yeah.
You wouldn't have been able to indulge the hope
for that long. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
And so that constraint, that false constraint on some level, like is a constraint that a lot of people are pushed into much younger. That's why they often totally take on all these careers that are very, very practical that they don't really love.
Yeah.
But they need
but at least they might be picking up skills along the way. Right.
Sure. But I mean, oftentimes constraint can be the enemy of happiness.
Yeah. Right.
In the sense of if it's too constraining, then people make a lot of decisions that have nothing to do with their soul.
Yeah, for sure.
And so you see a lot. You see a lot of that in lots of jobs.
You could see it go wrong for people either way.
Absolutely.
Where the constraints are too tight and they're just forced into unhappiness potentially to make a living.
Yeah, because pure practicality is not the happiness of the soul.
Right.
Right. I mean, the most human souls want to have some dream.
Yeah.
And a lot of people's dreams get crushed young.
Yeah.
From, in the worst cases, like early childhood trauma, but in more adult cases, just the practical reality of having to make a living. Like I remember when I got out of college, like I was depressed for 2 years. I mean, not like clinically depressed, but just like trying to find a vision depressed because I just realized like I went from this beautiful environment of college where I had no real constraints. Right. And my parents, in a really beautiful way, paid for college. And so I never thought about like how I was going to pay my bills in college. I didn't think about how I was going to pay for college itself. I didn't think about how I was going to pay for food. And I just used that time to study and learn and explore. And then suddenly I'm forced into a world where I don't get to explore anymore. And I have the constraint of I got to pay for my own life. And I have to have a job that I hate. I'm like, this is terrible.
Well, so what were you considering at the time? Do you remember?
I mean, I had no idea. Like, when I was coming out of college, my professors at the time all wanted me to, or encouraged me to be a professor because I was naturally academic and I was naturally inclined toward academic conversations. And I loved all that, but I loved it in a practical way. I was studying to learn about life and learn how to live. And so, the idea of being in the constraint of being a professor who's forced to think about these things, forced to write about these things, forced as a job, like just made me feel terrible. I just hated the idea. And so then I had no idea what to do. I was just searching for a path. Yeah. Right. Searching for a path, but I was constrained faster than you.
Right. Yeah.
Because I didn't have any, I guess I could have, my parents, like, it wasn't like they would have kicked me out of the house.
Yeah.
But I lived a long ways away from my parents. It would have been a big thing for me to go live with my parents.
Culturally is, you already moved away.
Yeah. I already moved away.
Like, I never,
it is culturally different, I mean, it might be changing, but like, when I was 18, 19 years old, like when you're in a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant home, and you leave, like you're not really welcome back. Yeah. Like go figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Persian Jewish culture isn't like that.
It's more communal.
They're gonna guide you to success, or even if it's just the perception of success. Right. If they could just help you live a lifestyle that's gonna help you be perceived a certain way, they're gonna do whatever they can to.
But they also want you to stay close.
They want you to stay close.
Right. Yeah. It's much more communal.
Yeah. There's no way. Like 18, we want you out of the house. They want you in the house as long as, ideally they'd really want you in the house until you get married, probably. Right. And then with the guys, they maybe offer a little, with the men, they maybe offer a little more freedom because they understand that, but yeah, I think you're right. The big cultural difference in that way.
Okay. So you get to this point and you're like, all right, I'm seeing the signals. I know I can make good sandwiches. Like everybody I've made sandwiches for, right? It's the old, like all elephants walk in a straight line. At least the one I saw did.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And you're like, everybody I've made sandwiches for has loved them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But you also have you didn't necessarily know how to lean into this at that point, but now you know for sure, like you have a real good intuition.
Yeah. So at that point, I'll kind of quickly go through like the rest of this to where we are now. So,
but start with the first drop. I mean, the first drop is literally like you're on Instagram.
Yeah. So I get off that call with my brother and we literally decide like, okay, this Thursday we're going to sell sandwiches. So we
take an action. I love that.
We post on Instagram, on my personal Instagram and Jessica's personal Instagram, not even the Carla Cafe Instagram. Yeah, Jessica, my wife.
At the time, she was your girlfriend.
Yeah.
But now, now you've had so much success, you guys could afford to get married.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah. So we both post it and we're like, this Thursday, selling this sandwich, the garlic Ali chicken sandwich, out of the house from this time to this time.
The first how many people?
And I think the goal was to sell 30, 35 sandwiches.
Okay. So you knew beforehand you got enough 30, responses. 35. So you didn't say there's only 35. You said, I'm making sandwiches. Who wants one? Is that?
Yeah. I don't think at any point we ever said what the constraint was of how many sandwiches we can make.
Okay.
We just said, we're doing it from this time to this time. In our minds, we knew how many we could make, like how many we're going to go for. We didn't communicate that. And then once we hit that number, we're like, all right, we're out. We can't do more than that. So, but I think for the first one, it was 30 or 35.
And all those people paid for the sandwich
in advance on Venmo.
On Venmo. The best.
So we and then we scheduled.
They responded on Instagram.
Yeah.
And they prepaid for the sandwich on Venmo.
And then I used the Notes app to basically put everyone on a schedule. Right. So I told them you could come at this time because I needed time. I needed time to make sandwiches.
Right. So you had windows.
I had windows.
You had pickup slots.
Basically, so from that first time, we had this concept of pickup slots. But the customer.
So the customer tells you when a sandwich on Insta.
And then I'm like, do you want to come at
prepays
this
for
time?
Venmo, comes and picks it up themselves from your house in the hills of Beverly Hills.
Yeah. And this is in the middle of, this is May 2020 at the height of COVID. And then I use that money to go buy the groceries.
Right. So there were no startup costs.
Yeah. No startup costs.
Because the consumer was prepaying for their item.
Yeah. So,
and there's no risk of not selling it.
Yeah. And at that point, because I had been making this, I'd personally do my grocery shopping at Gelson's, which is like a higher end. I don't know if there's Gelson's around the country, but it's like
there's not Gelson's in Georgia, but in Georgia, the only equivalent would be like Whole Foods.
Yeah, right.
Closest thing we have is Whole Foods.
I think even Whole Foods is like better priced than Gelson's.
Yeah.
Which
is saying something.
Yeah, it's saying something. So and then I create a little spreadsheet to run my numbers based on the cost at Gelson's. I'm like, all right, so what's the cost of a tomato? And then and then so I create a spreadsheet that will kind of like spit out what my profit will be based on how many sandwiches I sell. And when I'm like kind of like playing around with it to see, all right, how much money could I actually make doing this? I was like, all right, so we're going to do like 30. All right, I'll make a couple $100. Like, all right, what if we do 50? And then I'm like, and then when I sat there, I'm like, all right, I'm going to get really crazy. I want to see like, what if we do 100 one day? So the furthest I went in like the dream, like if this really explodes and gets crazy, was 100 to see what I'd make if I sold 100. And I think we sold like 180 probably by like drop 3. Drop 3, drop 4.
By the next week. So here you are. Alan says, go make some money now. 3 days later, you have the first drop.
Yeah.
And within 10 days of that, you actually like have a drop where you make money like you could live on.
Yeah. Like within weeks. Yeah. Because I was doing 1 drop a week at the time.
You started 1 drop a week.
Well, I think so. Yeah. 1 drop. I think we pretty quickly like progressed.
Pretty quickly. I remember it would be in 2, 3.
Pretty quickly.
Pretty fast.
I think we had to say no to so many people. Because like we would sell out of like the amount and I mean, and even when we sold 30 sandwiches, I was struggling to make them fast enough. So like I had a hard, like
it's just you and Jess and
me, Jess, and my
friends.
Mom, me, Jess, not that the first drop is me, Jess, my mom, and
you're in there toasting every piece of bread yourself in the oven.
I didn't understand anything about like commercial kitchen prep either. So like I'm slicing a tomato right there for that. It's not like I had like all the tomato prepped out. Yeah. I was like, I'm making a sandwich right now. I'm grilling the chicken. Now I'm slicing the tomato.
It's amazing.
So, all right. But so that first drop, I'm like running behind. I mean, it's that one is really just like friends and family.
But obviously the response was,
awesome. So I'm running behind and I'm just making sandwiches nonstop. And like, it was supposed to be like maybe 3 hours of sandwiches, but running behind it ends up taking me 4, but finally get to take my gloves off and look at my phone for the first time since I like started selling the sandwiches. And I just see like, I have hundreds of messages on like every app of people trying to see how can I get a sandwich. Like
so good.
And so I'm like, and then the physical labor of making the sandwiches was like, for me, was the most intense physical labor. Like it physically felt like I played like 4 like pickup basketball games back to back consecutively. And so like, I'm like walking like gingerly like to a chair with my phone out. I'm looking at it and I'm like, fuck. Is this really what I want to do for a living? This
might have legs, but do I want to run with it?
Yeah. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, exactly. I like the magic, from the first drop, the magic of like,
you knew it was there.
The magic was there. Yeah. But the plan was never that I'm going to sell these 30 sandwiches and I'm going to turn this into a career.
Well, and am I willing to embrace am I willing to embrace this gift I have? Because you're a food prophet in the sense that you have a lot of vision for food. You have a lot of intuition around food. You can shape things. You could take anything. Like I could say to you, I want you to make a better tiramisu. Mm-hmm. And within weeks, I guarantee you would make a better tiramisu. You would just if you got deep into tiramisu, your version of it would be something that people liked better than what they have. And that's just a gift. Right. And it's a gift that you've had for a long time because you were paying attention to your own food.
Yeah.
Right. and you were paying attention to what you and Jess were making, right? You weren't necessarily showing that gift to many people, your friends, your family. But this is a moment in time where you're like, all right, am I willing to reveal this gift to the world at the risk of not less, yes, I'm going to make some money, but at the risk of then having to deal with that as an identity. Right. Because obviously, like today, lots of people only know you in LA because of the sandwich. Yeah. Right. But now they think of you as a food prophet. Right. Right. They're like, how did you learn to make this sandwich? Like, I don't know. I just tinkering. I was tinkering. Yeah. Like every industry's early entrepreneurs, you're a tinkerer. Right. It's only later. You only get McDonald's later. Right. But the first guy's like messing around with burgers. Yeah. And trying to find something. Chick-fil-A, Truett was in a kitchen tinkering. Yeah. Like, it's not like his background sandwich. Wasn't like food. Like no. Yeah. I mean, he's tinkering, right? Yeah. But then the next generation just took that and turned it into a behemoth. Right. And the third generation now is making it even bigger. But it all dates back. Like, it just started with tinkering in a kitchen. Right. And he was committed to a chicken sandwich that he thought was excellent. Yeah. How do I make that? Yeah. And he had a good intuition around it. And you have the same thing. And so that moment in time, like you're at this, all right, we could have a lot of success, but this now may become like an identity. And am I willing to embrace that? Yeah. And then I think it was just at that time, like the work was exhausting, like the actual work of it. And the vision of when I'd be able to pull myself out of the kitchen or pull myself out of like the day-to-day grind of it wasn't clear to me. I wasn't thinking about that yet. Like what that route would be, but
you were a ways away from that. You were at least 3 weeks from that. No,
I mean, no, it was longer than that. Unfortunately. I know. I'm just teasing. But you don't know at the time. That's the point, is that you have to stay in the moment. Yeah. And just do the work. Yeah. Make the sandwich great. Yeah. And then the magic has to either's there or it's not. You can't create the magic. Yeah. Exactly. Necessarily, right? Yeah. Like if your sandwich was terrible, there would be no Carla. Right. Right. But it wasn't. It was great. People loved it. Yeah. They posted about it. They asked you about it. They told their friends about it. Yeah. So by 6 weeks in, you're selling probably 400 sandwiches a week. 400 we didn't get to out of the house yet. We got, I think the most we did out of the house was 280. 280 out of a small, it wasn't a big kitchen. Right. It was literally like it was small. Oven, it was small for a house in Beverly Hills. It was small. Well, no, but it was also a rental house. It was because you guys had that fire. The water, right? Yeah, the flood, which is, it all goes down to the magic of like, it was a perfect storm of really unfortunate events that led to Carla be able to happen. Right. And Carla's not a woman. No, it's the street I grew up on. Carla's the street. It's the street, Carla Ridge. Mm-hmm. It's where like my parents' house where I was making kind of the recipes, where I was creating the food originally. Yeah. Okay. So, first iteration, all the house, phase 2 goes to, phase 2. So there is H-Wood Group it's a group that has restaurants and nightclubs out in LA, but then now like all around the world actually. And so a couple of different owners of H-Wood Group were like just individually coming to the house to get sandwiches. They were eating the sandwiches. Yeah. And so they'd come to the house to pick up sandwiches, and then one of them approached me at some point and said, "Hey, all our nightclubs are closed and they all have full commercial kitchens. Like because of COVID, they're closed. So why don't you guys just come start operating out of there?" And they like a sweetheart deal is like pretty much like what they would charge. Like they only charged me per day that I'd use the kitchen. And it's amazing. And it was like essentially, maybe like enough to pay like the utilities for the day, And so this is Bootsy Bellows. Yeah. So we started operating. Sunset. Yeah. Bootsy Bellows on Sunset in West Hollywood. So we moved across the street from Soho House. Yeah. Right. It's a tough location to start. and then it was also at the bottom of the hill of the house that people were already used to coming to. Yeah. So like it basically like it's Just save people some time.
It's the same location, but like minus 4 minutes to drive up a hill.
Yeah.
Right. So,
well, and you had that cool setup with the kind of like the valet stand where then when people could just drive up and you could throw it in their car, right? On Sunset.
Yeah.
And so you could just like swing through Sunset and end up with a bag.
I mean,
of
they had
Carla.
to get out of the car, but yeah.
Do they always have to get out of the car?
Yeah, unless they like DM'd us and said I have a baby in the car.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. So they didn't always have to get out of the car.
They didn't always have to get out
They
of
had
the car.
special privileges with a baby.
But at the end of the day, you because you prepaid, like they'd pretty much just walk up, we'd hand them their food, and they'd go off.
Yeah.
It was a really nice system.
Yeah. So then at Bootsy, did you get up to every day or?
No, I think we only had gotten up to 3 times a week out of Bootsy.
How long were you at Bootsy?
Probably a little under a year.
And this is stepping back a little bit, but how long was it just one sandwich?
Over a year.
So the first sandwich was the garlic aioli chicken.
I think maybe like 2 or 3 weeks later, we released the tuna chop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were...
And the tuna chop was a sandwich I had never made yet at that point. But once it started taking off and the garlic aioli chicken sandwich was like, people were going crazy over it. My mind already started spinning on what the next sandwich would be.
Right. Because, you started to embrace your truth, which is your, as a food prophet. Then you start to be able to trust your own judgment. So then when you start to have a vision for it, you're like, all right, well, they seem to really like this vision. Let me do another one.
Yeah.
Like, what would my mind come up with next? And it's just kind of
it was remembering well, if you think about a sandwich, and then if you think about the way that I eat, when I eat, I'm very mindful of like creating the perfect bite each time. And the benefit of a sandwich,
you do it so well.
Yeah, right. But if you watch me eat, if there's a plate of food and it's not a sandwich, I'm being really meticulous about every bite.
Yeah.
But what a sandwich allows me to do is basically curate every bite in one compact thing, right? Where if I gave someone a plate of food, they might screw it up. They might fuck it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
You can't just stand there and like spoon it into their mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
In the way that you want them to eat it.
Yeah, right.
But a sandwich you can. It's like
Yeah,
and they're not going to deconstruct your sandwich. They're just going to eat it.
And so the tuna chop was based on a memory of a bite that I created. Right. So when I had like a La Scala chopped salad one time. And then like they have like a nice tuna, but they're like Italian, so their tuna just has like olive oil and nothing else. And I wouldn't really eat tuna that way. So like at home, I like dressed up the tuna myself, and then I took the salad and I took the bread that they give like on the side, and like I had made a bite, and this was just like a bite that I remembered from like 2 years before. And then, so when I was like, I had an opportunity to make sandwiches.
I love that kind of food memory.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't have that.
Yeah.
So like, I love that you're like storing in your memory banks.
Yeah. So then I'm like, I'm going to make a sandwich based off of that bite.
It's genius.
And then I got into the kitchen, and it was literally just one day of R&D, and I created something like an elevated, way better version than that bite.
Yeah.
And then we're like, all right, well, now we're going to do the tuna chop this week. Right.
Well, we've obviously gotten to spend a lot of time together in the kitchen, me not doing anything, me watching you and Jess and Britt and, just around the kitchen doing stuff, and watching you sculpt food makes me think of other professional athletes I've been around with their sports, where like I think of Parnelli Jones and the driving and the stories about him getting in a race car and going and taking 5 laps around the oval and coming back and saying these 7 things are wrong with the car.
Wow. He could just feel it.
He just could feel it. And they'd fix it up, but he was a car genius, he was a car prophet.
Yeah.
And so watching you with food is the same. You're like, this just needs more salt, or this needs a little balsamic, or, if we just had more vinegar here, like red wine vinegar, right? And like, you're just like shaping it.
Yeah.
And that's such a gift.
Yeah.
So second sandwich is the tuna chop.
Yeah, but I think to your point, that for a while we're still only doing one sandwich at a time. So out of Bootsy Bellows, from the house,
you do one type of sandwich a day.
Yeah, so it's like on this day, Tuesday we're doing tuna chop, Thursday we're doing garlic aioli chicken, Saturday whatever,
to keep it streamlined, simple.
Yeah, and so we grew to a 4 sandwich menu.
And what are the 4 sandwiches? Are there 4 right now? Is that it?
Still 4, yeah.
4. What are the 4 sandwiches?
Garlic aioli chicken sandwich, tuna chop, chicken pesto, and turkey bliss.
God, they're so good. When I think of LA, the only two things I crave in LA are Carla sandwiches and sugarfish. Everything else,
that's good company.
It's good company. And so, first thing I do when I'm like landing in LA, I'm looking across the concrete jungle of warehouses and houses, occasional palm trees, and we're flying into LAX, and I can actually start thinking about like I'm like an hour away from a Carla sandwich.
Yeah, right.
And now you're on Uber.
Yeah.
So now I can order it up on Uber Eats. We had Carla sandwiches delivered to Malibu. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, right.
I was so shocked when they delivered it, like North Malibu, not like Santa Monica adjacent Malibu. This is like deep into Malibu country.
Yeah. So we should get to the Uber part of it too, I guess, because for the longest time, one sandwich only, and then pickup only.
You leave Bootsy. After
no, we
year.
start Postmates out of.
You did. You started
very early Postmates. At the tail end of Bootsy.
How did that come together?
So our sandwich sales, we basically, for probably about a year, our only constraint was supply. So if we make 300 sandwiches available that day, it would sell out within like an hour or less a day before, right? And then on pre-orders. And then our only constraint is shit. How do we make a little bit more? I think we got to the point. I think the most we did pick up, we pick up only out of Bootsy Bells. We hit like 420 sandwiches
in a day.
People coming to pick them up. And but then we hit that, and then at some point there started to be a little bit of a decline trend in our sales. And so then I was like, well, what can I attribute this to? And what we realized is that as LA started opening up, the pickup only process was something that worked well during COVID in LA because no one really had anywhere to be. Mm-hmm. So for them to just have like a pickup slot the next day was like, it was their activity for the day.
Yeah, it was kind of something to get out and do.
But as like their kids started going back to school and they started going back to work, and traffic started going back to normal in LA, like all of a sudden, like, because we would have people driving out from Venice.
Didn't matter. I mean, during COVID, it was so magical. During
COVID, it was a 15, 20 minute drive from Venice.
You realize how small LA is when there's no traffic.
Oh yeah. And how amazing LA is. Like that's what LA is supposed to be.
That's right.
Right.
LA, when they first put those freeways in the 60s, was probably just magic.
Yeah. So we realized that it's not that people stopped liking our sandwiches. It was just that the system no longer worked as well. So we did a deal with Uber to get back on the Uber app, or Postmates, to get on Postmates and Uber Eats. And then
is Postmates owned by Uber?
Yeah,
they are.
Yeah, they got bought. Pretty close to like when we went on, maybe like a few months before.
Okay.
And then yeah, so then we got onto Postmates out of Bootsy, and then the sales just like skyrocketed again. Something else that happened. So like, we would have people request sometimes to get like the tuna chop as a salad. Right. And so on our like
the bread haters.
Yeah. Like people that are trying to be healthy. Yeah. Right.
Wait,
they were like, can I get it as
bread's
a salad?
Not healthy.
Yeah. So
dang it.
We kind of had like secretly, some people knew that there was a salad, and the way to order it was a little bit like disjointed to order a salad.
But it was off menu.
It was kind of an off menu thing that we would sell like, I don't know, like 10 a day. Mm-hmm. And then
deconstructed sandwich.
Yeah. But once we were going to be utilizing the Postmates software, and then having at that point have all the full menu available every day, then I had a hunch that like once there was visibility for the salad, we were going to start selling more salads. But our luck, there's a big influencer out in LA named Tinks. She's big for women probably across the country. And she happened to order the salad the day before we were going to be opening on Postmates. And she posted like a a series of stories onto Instagram, like freaking out over the salad. So then like the first day we had this perfect storm of the first day we launch on Postmates. We also have all of a sudden like hundreds of girls like trying to come figure out how to get a salad. So we sold like, I think like 120 salads that day, but like now the salads are just a thing too. So like since then it's been like a mainstay. We've now added another salad to the menu. So
what are the two? So you have two salads.
Two salads.
What are the two salads?
It's a chopped salad.
Tuna chop salad?
Yeah. Well, the chopped salad, you could either get it with no protein or tuna or chicken.
Okay.
And then we just added a salad called the Riff salad, which it's chopped a little bit. It's amazing. You're going to love it. You'll love that salad.
What's in that one?
That's the first salad I made where it was like my vision for a salad.
Ooh.
Right? Because the chopped salad was just like, all it is was one topping that goes into the tuna chop sandwich. It was just one component of the tuna chop sandwich, and then we just put it in a salad container. Yeah. Right. But this Riff salad is basically like me actually curating what do I want in a salad. So you'll love it. Yeah.
Well, generally I know if you like it and you made it, then I'm going to love it. Right. Because I'm fortunate enough to have and clearly I'm not the only one, but the things you like are a palette that I love. And that's obviously true for thousands of people in LA.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
You're curating what we actually want, but we didn't know how to get.
Yeah. Right.
It's like Jobs with an iPhone.
Yeah.
We didn't know how much we'd love it.
Yeah.
But once it was in our hands, we're like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah, exactly.
What could go wrong with this? He knew exactly what he was doing. Okay, so you expand the menu. You're on Uber Eats, Postmates. You're doing all of this out of a Bootsy Bellows ghost kitchen, basically.
Yeah.
And then you outgrow that space.
Yeah, and then we moved to another ghost kitchen.
But now it's every day.
And then we eventually got to every day, being open every day.
And now, like, people can just pull up Uber Eats and order Carla any time of the day. Yeah. Or whenever you're open.
Yeah. And even that is like it's a constraint. We really wanted to continue to have an in-person connection with our customers. But we weren't gonna kind of like force it or like do it too soon or force it into a space that we weren't going to be excited about. We went to the ghost kitchen.
Coming next,
but that's coming next. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the story on that? How much of that are you revealing? And
not a ton yet.
Okay.
But yeah.
but there is something brewing.
There's something brewing. Hopefully in like the next month or two.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah. People are going to go bananas.
I hope so. Yeah.
All right. So what I want to do is I want to wrap up kind of this conversation about Carla. What's some of the vision right now? What's some of the vision you have for Carla from this point? What are some of the things you're imagining?
I would say
start with menu. Like, how big do you think the menu gets?
Like the menu will always be tight.
Okay.
So it's important that like, I think when we see like a success like Carla, because to me, that's like, a part of that is just magic. Like a lot of things had to happen along the way for it to work out. And then you get the benefit of examining what's working. And I think a part of what our advantage is of why I think we could deliver food at a much higher level than so many other places, because I don't think we're just the best sandwich shop. I think it's hard. I think it's hard in LA or probably anywhere to get food at that level.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Well, it's like I said, I mean, I think you with the constraint of tiramisu would make the best tiramisu.
But some of it is like how I create it, right? Like, so some of it is taste, right? And the original creation, but then the next part of that equation is like, okay, well, how do you execute it at that level consistently? And I think a tight menu is important for being able to do that, because if you want to actually be able to continue making these things in-house and not like totally industrialize it, or if you don't want to have a huge amount, or if you have a big menu, you start struggling with, I'm either going to have a ton of waste, which then will just make it not profitable and we won't survive. right? Or we have to start compromising the quality of what we're using because we're not going to have the waste because
that's unacceptable.
Right. It's not acceptable. So to me, like, to be able to continue being Carla, right, what Carla should be, it's going to require a tight menu.
Well, and Carla, the brand that is Carla, can't have anything on the menu that's a throwaway.
No, that doesn't make sense. When I go anywhere and when I go to a restaurant and I have something that's not good, and then someone tells me, "Oh, well, you're not supposed to order that." Well, why is it on the menu? Why would you ever put something on your menu that someone could come try, have a bad experience, and then not come back? Right. So I think that's important. You can't have everything.
Well, you would never have something on your menu that you weren't excited about.
Yeah.
But that's really the thing that oftentimes is lost as restaurants get bigger and become more corporate is who's the curator. Right now, like, you're the ultimate curator of what is allowed on the menu.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible gift because when people come into Carla, they know they're sitting down and looking at a menu that Avi's approved.
Yeah. Right.
I'm serious, but that's an incredible gift, and no different than if you were a technology guru and said, "This is the phone you're going to love," and every time I picked it up, I'm like, "You're right, that's the phone I'm going to love." Or you were whatever, like you were a wine critic and you were like, "These are the 10 wines you want to buy," and I was like, "Avi's always right." Right? And so that's such a gift to people. That they know that you care about the menu enough to not put anything on it that you don't think is excellent. Yeah,
and I think while we're talking about it, it came to me to answer your question a little bit better. I think my vision for Carla, like, something I always think about is I want Carla to be a place where you can eat every day. Right? I don't know if obviously not everyone will. But we just talked about Chick-fil-A yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. And how I asked you what percent of Georgia
is eating Chick-fil-A on
any given day. Right. And when I think about Carla, right, so the menu needs to be able to meet those requirements. Like, it needs to be able to satisfy.
Don't you have a breakfast burrito now?
Yeah. Right. So you want to be able to get Carla at different times of the day. Right. Yeah. So might have it for lunch one day, might have it for dinner, might have it for breakfast. So it needs to satisfy that. It needs to satisfy convenience, right? Like, if we want it to be a part of people's, like, everyday lives, it can't be like, oh, I need to drive 30 minutes to get Carla. So eventually it needs to scale to the point where it could be convenient for people to have it daily.
Yeah, right? In all the locations, starting in LA, all the locations in LA that people would like Carla.
Yeah.
Right? Like, people in Pasadena would love Carla.
Right.
But it's harder to get in Pasadena.
Yeah.
Right.
For now.
Although we might I wonder if I could Uber Eats it in Pasadena. I think
sometimes it's during certain hours.
Certain traffic.
Yeah, exactly. Uber picks up on traffic.
But it'd be better if I could in Malibu just go to the Carla.
Right.
Right. That'd be more convenient not more convenient, just more flexible.
Right.
Than if I could only get it on Uber Eats. And it took 45 minutes. And so, maybe I'd rather have it right there.
I think so.
Of course.
So, and then I think and then when we think about growth and so obviously convenience is a component. But the other part of our growth was, like, generating excitement for people. So I think the way we think about growth is we're going to have some locations that are like flagship locations. Like, this first one's going to be kind of like a flagship location, right? Where it's going to be really focused on an experience that when people come, they're going to be excited about it and they're going to want to post on social media. Right. And it helps generate the growth and excitement, which has been, like, fundamental to our business. And then we're going to have, but at the end of the day, most of the locations, I think, as we grow, will be less about that. I think we'll have, like, a mix of, like, flagship, but then most will be just these hubs that it's, like, just all about convenience, like, get in, get out, like, located in a place where, like, either within a neighborhood or an office stack, right? And so I think that's what we're thinking for the future of Carla.
Yeah. So then the next future. You think it just stays in LA in the immediate?
In the immediate, yeah. I think growing within LA. I think because at
this point, so many people from New York, Chicago, Atlanta, London have had Carla while they were in LA.
Yeah. And the way I think about this,
they're probably all like me. They're like, God, I wish I could get a Carla sandwich right now. How many times have I texted you be like, I need a Carla sandwich right now?
Yeah. But the way I think about it, and it kind of goes back to some of the things I've learned from like the tech fundamentals is think about it in terms of testing. Like I don't want to take an unnecessary risk that could like collapse the business. Right. And so,
of course not.
But at the same time, like when you are thinking about, well, I think we could do well in New York. Well, you do like want to figure out a way to test that sooner than later. Right. Yeah. Like you want to, because then like New York, like opens up the door to a whole nother market. Like first, just like then broader New York, right? Like one location will then like, if there's excitement, then it opens up the door for broader New York, but then just different people traveling to New York, and then like East Coast. Right. So, but then even within LA, I think about it as like, there's tests to run even within LA of how many locations do we need just like within like, I think we're going to test having a location in West Hollywood. And then like I should talk to you about it like off mic, but we're going to have another location that's not actually that far from West Hollywood, but it's like a sweetheart deal, just like at the bottom of an office stack in an area where it's just like all offices. Right. And like just within that, just being able to test like that just tests like a location that's less about excitement for the consumer, but more about functionality. Right. And then how do those
hopefully it's
two,
in Century City and it's just all of those offices that are just ordering everything. You're just gonna every single day at CAA there's gonna be stacks of Carla sandwiches.
Yeah.
I mean that made perfect sense. And I love that functionality. I mean, I'm not saying it's
right.
I'm just saying Century City would be an amazing place to do that.
Yeah, right.
So I totally get that notion of having a small location at the bottom of a stack that really all around you is just people who want to consume these various sandwiches and salads and even though it's like
under 3 miles away from like where the first location is going to be, right? It's still
3 miles in LA is different worlds.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's why I always tell my friends from the other place, I'm like, listen, the best way to live in LA is you have a nice house that you really like. Your office is within 2 miles of your house.
Yes.
And you don't leave that bubble.
Yeah. Right. And then hopefully it's on one side of the like both like your work and home should be on the same side of the 405.
Has to be. You can't be in a 405 crossing situation,
especially not at 5 o'clock.
That brings down all of the joy.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
All right, we're going to close up the Carla Cafe section now, and then we'll move on to podcast number 2.
Awesome.